Why are we called Negroes? Why are we deaf, dumb, and blind? Why is everybody making progress, yet we seem to be lagging so far behind? Why are we mistreated? Why are we in this condition, stripped of our names, our language, our culture, our God, and our religion? Here in America, all of our religious training has been gotten by the preacher. He has told us of a heaven way up in the sky that we can't enjoy now, but rather after we die. But all of the years that we're living, for us there's nothing but hell, pain, torture, and misgiving. Yet the Bible speaks of a heaven filled with material luxury, which the white man and the preacher has right here, so we see. So my friend, take it for what it's worth. Your heaven and your hell is right here on this earth. So let's check back into history, which rewards all research and tells us plainly. Before the white man gained entry to the East, he was living in the caves of Europe, a ravenous beast, eating juniper roots and eating flesh raw, till God sent Moses to civilize him and teach him the law. Then, following Marco Polo, an explorer, he gained entry into Asia and Africa. From China he took silk and gunpowder. From India he took jute, manganese, and rubber. He raped Africa of her diamonds and her gold. From the Mideast he took barrels of oil untold. Raping, robbing, and murdering everything in his path, the whole black world has tasted of the white man's wrath. So my friend, it's not hard to tell, a white man's heaven is a black man's hell. America, we were living in the East. By the Nile River, we were living in luxury, enjoying freedom, justice, and equality. We wore silken robes and slippers of gold. We were the wealthiest and the wisest people, I'm told. Now we are the poorest of the poor. Nobody wants us at their door. So my friend, it's easy to tell, white man heaven is black man hell. When the white man came to America, he told the Indian, I am your white brother. He said, red man, I'll treat you the best. Yet and still he pushed the Indian further west with his white woman and firewater. With tricks and lies he stole America. The original owner of this nation is cooped up on a reservation. So my friend, it's easy to tell, white man heaven is black man hell. He needed someone to work the land. His back was too weak. He needed you, black man, so he commissioned Sir John Hawkins to commit the world's most grievous sin, to take a man who's born to be free and bring him down to slavery, to sell a man as merchandise. On his body put a price. Oh, my friend, it's easy to tell. White man heaven is black man hell. John Hawkins showed up in our country, telling us of a land filled with luxury. He said, black man, follow me to America. There you'll find more gold for your labor. Our foreparents were tricked onto his boat. Since that time we've been wrestling with the goat. We landed here in Jamestown, Virginia, 400 years to suffer. So my friend, it's easy to tell.
Hello, everyone. It's me, your buddy BRG. Today is the 4th day of Black August. And there's a saying. Who coined this saying? I did. If you're black and a revolutionary, you came to revolution through Malcolm X. Because there is no theoretician, there is no revolutionary who has had as much impact on the black liberation struggle in this country like Malcolm X has. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Huey P. Newton, it doesn't matter if you are Assata Shakur. Everybody comes through Malcolm. Why does everybody come through Malcolm? Because he's basically our Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao rolled into one. And I'm not a supporter of Jefe Tura. I think Jefe Tura is stupid, and I do not promote cults of personality. But everything that we know as leftists, everything that we know as black revolutionaries in this country, Malcolm taught us. He taught us that if somebody puts their hand on you, to put them in the cemetery. He taught us that only by doing for ourselves can we hope to see revolution. Nobody is coming to liberate us. That is what Malcolm taught us. So me and countless other revolutionaries from the new African nation, we came to the revolution through Malcolm X. I read Malcolm X's autobiography before I read a single piece of anything by Mao or Lenin or Marx. So he is that important. Just like back in the day, every brother on the rooftop was reading Fanon. Every brother on the rooftop was reading Fanon after reading Malcolm X. So Where did Malcolm come from? Um, Unlike many revolutionary leaders who come from petty bourgeois backgrounds, their parents were lawyers, doctors, especially in the black community. A lot of our revolutionaries came from the preacher class. Um, Malcolm X was from a pretty poor family. His mom was from Grenada, Louise Norton. She was from Grenada and she was half white. Her dad was a Scottish rapist, so Malcolm was 25% Scottish. Willingly, of course. This was not a happy relationship, just like most relationships between white men and black women back in this time period were not happy. These were rapes and forced cohabitation and all sorts of other horrible things. So, um, Louisa was her real name, Louisa Langdon Norton, moved from Grenada to Canada. And there she met Earl Little, who was from Georgia. He was a sharecropper, just like my grandparents were sharecroppers, meaning you, yeah, CQ mentions that the Scot gave him his reddish hair and his lighter skin complexion. As a matter of fact, even though Earl Little, his dad, was a very strong supporter of the Garvey movement, also known as UNIA, United Negro Improvement Association, he was still caught up on color. They called it being color struck back in the day. Nowadays we call it being colorist. But his dad used to basically beat the fuck out of his darker skinned siblings because they were dark, while he would he would fawn on Malcolm because Malcolm was the lightest. And Louise, who was light, like she was so light that she could pass for white in many instances, was very hard on Malcolm because Malcolm had red hair and lighter skin. So she was trying to blot out the memory of that rape and who her father was. Her father was a literal Scottish rapist from her memory by being hard on Malcolm. Anyways, so they moved to the U.S. They got married in 1919, and they gave birth to Malcolm in 1925. His slave name was Malcolm Little. She was born in 1897 in Grenada in a community called La Digue. Maurice Bishop actually talks about this community and the fact that one of the greatest revolutionaries of the new African people had roots in his country. Grenada was extremely poor. It was a British colony, so the Brits did not make black people rich. They stole from us. So there was a lot of migration. Between 1911 and 1921, 12,045 people immigrated. They left Grenada, and a lot of them went to Canada, Britain, and the United States. Grenadian immigrants went to virtually every corner of the Americas and to the United Kingdom. So Louise and Earl were active in the Garvey movement. She was a Pan-African, and she was a staunch supporter of her husband's work because back then women were seen and not heard. But she was a vocal supporter of the UNIA movement, and her husband would admit that without Louise and her organizing skills, like this lady spoke French, she was very well educated. Earl Little, the sharecropper from Georgia, was not, because they taught you to pick cotton in Georgia. They did not teach you how to read, never mind read in French. So, like I mentioned earlier, she was so light she would pass for white, and Louisa's features would often pose an additional danger, as some white supremacists could have mistakenly targeted her as a white woman with a black man. And even though she could have done this, she remained a proud black woman. Like, she would tell you, I'm black, I'm not white or any of this shit, because she was the product of a rape. So she, like Bob Marley was the same way. Bob Marley couldn't stand white people because his dad was white and his dad was a piece of shit. So Louise was secretary of the local UNIA branch, and they read African American and Caribbean newspapers at home, and they were regularly educated about current affairs in both the Caribbean and Africa, and of course in the United States. So that was his mom. His dad, he was born in Reynolds, Georgia in 1890. He married his first wife, Daisy Mason, had 3 kids. Then in 1919, he married his second wife, Louise Norton, had 7 children. So he had 10 kids in total. They had big families back then. Throughout the 20s, he was active. He was the president of the UNIA branch in Omaha. He was the president of the UNIA branch in Milwaukee. And he was a very active in Gary, Indiana as well. What happened to Malcolm's dad? He was run over by a streetcar. Was he just stumbling around drunk? No, because the UNIA movement was about discipline. And one of their senior leaders would not be just stumbling around. He was murdered by a group called the Black Legion in Lansing, Michigan. This was basically a Ku Klux Klan or type organization. These types of groups were extremely popular in the 20s and 30s, and they basically beat the fuck out of him and laid him on the streetcar track so he could be hit by the streetcar when it came through. He was run over at Detroit Street and East Michigan Avenue. And this is just colonizer bullshit trying to cover up the fact that he was killed by the Klan. He was survived by his wife, Miss Louise Little, 10 kids. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. John Little of Riddle, Georgia. He had 3 sisters, one of which was Ella, who Malcolm lived with for a while after he left foster care, and he also had a brother, James Little. And they had his funeral at the Buck Funeral Home on Thursday, whenever this was, at 2 o'clock, and they buried him in Georgia. So yeah, he was murdered by the Klan, and this had a substantial impact on Malcolm's family because back then, like, social workers, welfare workers, like, these were not good people, especially towards black people. They basically treated us as burdens on the state. We were supposed to be picking cotton. We were not supposed to be living in urban areas on relief. But, like, just think of it. Think about it. Miss Little, Louise Little, had 10 kids. How the fuck was she supposed to work in the middle of the Great Depression to take care of 10 kids? She could not. So she had to seek relief. And these people would literally humiliate you. This happened all the way up until the 70s and 80s. Like, if they found a man's pair of slippers in your house, they would cut your relief off. If they found a dude's tie in your closet, they would cut your relief off. Like, these were the most sadistic, horrible types of people, these welfare workers and social workers. They also loved splitting up black families. What other institution loves splitting up black families? Slavery. So you see the direct continuance between the welfare system and slavery. Basically denying black people agency, denying black people the ability to take care of their kids. And slavery, they wouldn't even let you see your kids because they'd sell your kids to bumfuck Arkansas while you were in Virginia. So basically white people enjoying playing with the lives of black people and our children. And this did a psychological number on us. Like, if you are forbidden to take care of your kids or have somebody around to help you take care of your kids because you'll get your paltry ass relief shut off, you're not going to be very healthy mentally. So Malcolm X's mom, this pan-Africanist, this extremely intelligent woman, this woman who spoke French, this woman who left her native land to come and try to make a better life for herself, she had a mental break. She was stressed the fuck out. She ended up in a mental hospital, in a mental institution. Mental institutions back then were not exciting, fun, affirming places. They would lobotomize you. Like, they would literally pump your brain full of chemicals and hack out pieces of your brain until you were what they defined as normal. Black people, you were subject to experiments. They would put you in a chair and spin you around and around and around to see what happened. They would give you all sorts of nasty chemicals to see what happened. Like, Miss Louise was subjected to this type of stuff. So this was some Nurse Ratched type shit. This was not a place that you wanted to go. It was basically more akin to a prison to go to a state hospital. So Malcolm and his relatives, his brothers and sisters, were split up. They ended up in foster care. And foster parents were white people. And when he was in elementary and middle school, like, they basically treated him like a mascot. He talks about all of this in his autobiography, which all of you should read. But he told one of his teachers, I think this was in middle school, that he wanted to be a lawyer because this was the Scopes trial era. You had like, lawyers were basically like celebrities, and this was a way that, because Malcolm was already known for being extremely intelligent. He had a very quick wit, and he was Yeah, he was a smart dude. But one of his white teachers told him that he should be a teacher, not a teacher, a carpenter instead. Like, no, it was like black people cannot be lawyers. You all are not smart enough to be lawyers. So why don't you just go do like Jesus and be a carpenter, or go teach at a Negro school? Do something, but you cannot be a lawyer. So you basically crushed this dude's hopes and dreams, and yeah. So you basically have just insult after insult after insult after insult that's being piled onto this kid in his formative years. And it ended up with him like becoming a hustler. He did not want to work for a living. He was like, why the fuck should I go work for white people? They're never going to respect me. They hate me. They treat me like shit. They gave my mom a nervous breakdown. They harassed her until she lost her mind. They killed my dad. They split up my family. So you have this rage against the settler society that's boiling inside this young man, turning into a teenager, turning into a young adult. So he after he came of age, he moved to Boston, and he started working as a Pullman porter on the not a Pullman porter. He was a waiter on one of the railways back then, and he was expected to clown because they did not expect black people to be intelligent. They expected us to be like minstrel characters. So he would go up and down and be like, "Yeah, sir, I got the best sandwiches in New York City." So like that is what they expected from us, the happy darky. So he got sick of that. He became a hustler. And what he says about this time in his life, he says, and because I had been a hustler, I knew better than all whites knew, and better than nearly all of the black leaders knew, meaning the black leaders that were from a petty bourgeois upper class background, that actually the most dangerous black man in America was the ghetto hustler. Why do I say this? The hustler out there in the ghetto jungles has less respect for the white power structure than any other Negro in North America. The ghetto hustler is internally restrained by nothing. He has no religion. He has no concept of morality. He has no civic responsibility, no fear, nothing. To survive, he is out there constantly preying upon others, probing for any human weakness like a ferret. The ghetto hustler is forever frustrated, restless, and anxious for some action. Whatever he undertakes, he commits himself to it fully, absolutely. What makes the ghetto hustler yet more dangerous is his glamour image to the school dropout youth in the ghetto. The ghetto teenagers see the hell caught by their parents struggling to get somewhere, or see that they have given up struggling in the prejudiced, intolerant white man's world. The ghetto teenagers make up their own minds. They would rather be like the hustlers, whom they see dressed sharp and flashing money and displaying no respect for anybody or anything. So the ghetto youth become attracted to the hustler worlds of dope, thievery, prostitution, and general crime and immorality. So when white people ask, oh, why do y'all do this? Like, why do you all steal? Why do you all do all these things? Malcolm X explains it right there. You've shut us out of your society. You won't let us be investment bankers, doctors, lawyers, all of these good things. Of course, this was back in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. Now you can be a sellout. You can go be an investment banker on Wall Street. You can gentrify the old neighborhood. But back then, you couldn't do shit. You cannot do anything. So he explains it like right there. And even today, you still cannot do anything. How the fuck are you going to go get an MBA or get a finance degree, get an MBA in finance, and your school greatly resembles a prison and has no accreditation? Like these conditions still exist, except now these aren't legal barriers, because back then a black dude couldn't work on Wall Street because black people were not allowed on Wall Street in any sort of capacity other than a messenger or a janitor. But now you can go work on Wall Street if you know the people that can get you into college, if you know the people that can get you into a good private school. But most black people do not know those types of people. So we still live in the same conditions that Malcolm is talking about here. So yeah. So this is just a timeline of Malcolm's life from PBS. His mom lived in a mental institution, the Kalamazoo State Mental Hospital, for 26 years. They would visit her a lot. So he first came in contact because he was raised in like Lansing, Michigan. That was a little one horse ass town, one pool hall ass town. And he laughs in his autobiography because like when he got to Boston and New York, they looked at him and it's like, yeah, you're from the fucking sticks, man. So he had to get new clothes and stuff like that. So Ella got custody of him in 1941. He moved to Boston. He works as a number of odd jobs on railroads, restaurants and bars, shoe shine stands, and in a jewelry store. He dresses like a hipster. No, I'm not talking about fucking skinny jeans and thick glasses. I'm talking like zoot suits. And he dyed his hair. His hair was already red, but he dyed it into this like ridiculous flame red ass color. And he started hustling. He was known as New York Red, and in New York, he was known as Detroit Red because most people didn't know where the fuck where Lansing, Michigan was, but they knew where Detroit was because Detroit was a poppin' city back then. 1943, he responded to his draft notice by loudly proclaiming that he wants to fight for the Japanese and kill white people. He literally said that he wanted to go down south and organize black troops into guerrilla units to slaughter white troops and white locals. So he received a mental disqualification, got 4F. So he got out of World War II on that one. He started going to jail, getting in trouble. He went on a stealing spree in Boston with his best friend Malcolm Jarvis and 3 white women, one of which he had been dating. This woman was actually Armenian. Her name was Bea. I don't remember what her last name was. Something Akian. I don't know. He was sent to jail at the age of 20, and he stayed in jail from 1946 to 1952. And what was his jail experience like? Okay, jail was horrible. I mean, jail is still horrible, but like this is, first of all, you're segregated. And then like second of all, you've got this basically big ass granite walled castle type building, old schools type cells, rats, roaches, shitty. But they actually called him Satan in prison because he hated all religion. He like when the priest came around, like he would curse the priests out. So they gave him the name Satan. But he was also a very good debater. Imagine this is what he looked like when he was 25. That's a conch. Basically, you would put lye and other chemicals in your hair until it was straight. And he talks in his autobiography about how like ridiculous it looked. Like you literally had to walk around with a handkerchief over your head. That's where the term handkerchief head came from. Well, it was realigned to that because the handkerchief head was originally just a menial worker. But like you would literally have to walk around with the handkerchief over your head to stop from spoiling your conch. You would only take it off. It was like unwrapping a present. You would only take it off when you went out to the club so that everybody could see how you had fucked yourself up to make your hair straight like a settler's. Nice fedora though. So yeah, he became a really, really good debater. Um in February 1926, he was 21 years old. That's the same age that Fred Hampton was when he was murdered. He was convicted of robbery and sentenced to 8 to 10 years in his Charlestown State Prison. He got this heavy sentence because he was hanging around with white women and dating and sleeping with one of them. So that was his penalty for the crime of miscegenation. Ooh. Malcolm described himself as physically miserable and evil-tempered as a snake. A fellow inmate encouraged him to take advantage of the courses and library materials offered by the jail. He only made it up to the 8th grade, but he began studying the dictionary. There's actually a really good scene in the Spike Lee movie where he's basically going through the dictionary and memorizing every word. And he comes to the realization that like everything associated with darkness is portrayed as being evil. Black male, black ball, black this, black that. There is no positive connotation with darkness or with blackness in the dictionary at this time. But whiteness, a white lie, it's something that's not so serious. Yeah. And back then they had a saying, that's mighty white of you, meaning that's a really cool thing you just did. Thank you. So you have white supremacy that's soaked into the very language that people use without thinking about it. Black, bad. White, good. So he was transferred to Norfolk. He had his own cell and more freedom. He started debating, and he realized that he loved debating. He also became a member of the Nation of Islam. We'll talk more about the Nation of Islam later because you cannot talk about Malcolm X without talking about the Nation of Islam because Malcolm X basically built the Nation of Islam. Like, people don't realize, like, if Malcolm had not joined the Nation, it would have remained a small cult. Okay? But he honed his ability to speak, and he honed his extensive vocabulary, and he honed his knowledge of history, philosophy, and political theory in prison. He also hated Nietzsche. He referred to Nietzsche as a very silly man, if I recall correctly. So, yeah. But that's how it was in jail. So, what is the Nation of Islam? You have this guy, Wallace Fard. That's him. Doesn't look very black to me. Like, you have this black separatist, black supremacist cult founded by this dude. He does not look very black to me. Like, you could tell that's not a conch. That's his natural style of hair. But this was the guy who founded the Nation of Islam. So Wallace Fard, also known as W. Farad Muhammad, the Prophet, was founder of the first Temple of Islam, which evolved into the Nation of Islam, also known as the Black Muslims. Authentic documented information about Farad is very scarce, and there's only a 4-year period, 1930 to 34, in which dependable information exists. So this guy was definitely a con artist. Like, when you have very limited information about somebody, that means that they're a con artist. They move from place to place and they change their name. Like, you might change your shirt every day because they're trying to escape from the people that they've ripped off. According to Fard, he was born in Mecca to wealthy parents in the tribe of Quraysh, the tribe of the Prophet Muhammad. According to FBI records, Fard was born in 1891 in New Zealand. So he might have been of Maori descent, but chances are he was just a white Brit. He arrived in the United States in 1913 and briefly settled in Portland, Oregon. He was arrested in Cali in 1918 for possession of alcohol and again in 1926 for possessing narcotics, probably marijuana. He was at San Quentin and then he moved to Detroit. He started selling umbrellas and silks door to door in the black neighborhood. It was called Paradise Valley at the time. Was it a paradise? No, the fuck it was not. At some point, Fard began promoting a new faith he believed would liberate Detroit blacks spiritually, psychologically, and financially. He began to preach that Christianity was a false religion. He particularly denounced white devils, of which he obviously was one. He began to denounce white devils and said that they exploited the black race, which is true. And he called on his followers to join his Temple of Islam and replace their last names with X in order to renounce their slave ancestry. And one thing about cults is that they always do well when the economy is shitty. You had the Great Depression going on. People were looking for answers. You had a bunch of cults that were around, not just the soon-to-be Nation of Islam. You also had the Father Divine movement. You had the Daddy Grace movement. You had all sorts of religious cults because when shit goes belly up, people want answers. People are angry. And if the government is not able to provide them with answers, they seek out these weird ass pseudo cults, pseudo religions. And yeah, cults always do well when the economy is doing bad or when there's a war going on. Fard disappeared in 1934. One of his disciples, Elijah Poole, who became the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, succeeded Fard, and by World War II had built the Temple of Islam into a network of mosques across the United States. Elijah Muhammad also was locked up in World War II for trying to register as a conscientious objector to the draft. So Fard set up the first Temple of Islam. It had the Fruit of Islam, basically the security guards of the NOI, the Muslim Girls Training Corps class, and a University of Islam, which, despite its name, was mainly focused on elementary and high school level education. So, yeah, there's white dude. So, here's Elijah Muhammad speaking about Fard.
I looked at him and he, it just came to me like this, that this is the Son of Man that the Bible said, that prophesied that will come in the last days of the world, and that I couldn't get that out of me. And I shook hands with him, and I said to him, I say, you are the one that the Bible prophesies that will come at the end of the world.
Yeah, so they believe that this guy is like a Messiah, the last Messiah.
Well,
and the fact that he disappeared, it sort of lends credence to this myth that they've built around this guy. Like, oh, he disappeared. He's going back to be with Allah.
under the name Son of Man and under the name the second coming of Jesus. And so he looked at me a little stern, and then he smiled and he put his head down to my beside my head and whispered in my ear and said these words. He said, "Yes, I am the one, but who knows that? But yourself. And be quiet." His mother, he says, was a white woman, and his father was a black man. Yes, sir. He taught us that he was born in Mecca, Arabia, and that
Okay, now, if non-Muslims are not allowed in Mecca, like where the fuck did a white woman come from in Mecca? I don't know, maybe she was Bosnian or something, I don't know.
he had come in and out of this country for about 20 years before ever that he made himself known to us. He had studied, he says, out here, or rather he had...
So yeah, you basically got this this dude that thinks he's the Messiah, and other people think that he's the Messiah. So what is the program of the Nation of Islam? Like, what do they want? What do they believe? So this is from Message to the Black Man in America, probably Muhammad's most famous writing. It says, "We want freedom. We want full and complete freedom. We want justice, equal justice under the law. We want justice applied equally to all, regardless of creed or class or color. We want equality of opportunity. We want equal membership in society with the best in civilized society. We want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of our own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obliged to provide such land and that the area must be fertile and minerally rich. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory for the next 20 to 25 years until we are able to produce and supply our own needs. Since we cannot get along with them in peace and equality, after giving them 400 years of our sweat and blood and receiving in return some of the worst treatment human beings have ever experienced, we believe our contributions to this land and the suffering forced upon us by white America justifies our demand for a complete separation in a state or territory of our own. We want freedom for all believers of Islam now held in federal prisons. We want freedom for all black men and women now under death sentence in innumerable prisons in the North as well as the South. We want every black man or woman to have the freedom to accept or reject being separated from the slave master's religion and establish a land of our own. We want an immediate end to the police brutality and mob attacks against the so-called Negro throughout the United States. We believe that the federal government should intercede. So if you don't trust the federal government, why do you trust them to intercede? Like this stuff doesn't even make sense. To see that the black man and woman tried in white courts receive justice in accordance with the laws of the land, or allow us. First of all, you take a nation. They don't allow you to build a nation. To build a new nation for ourselves dedicated to justice, freedom, and liberty. We demand equal employment opportunities. We do not believe that after 400 years of free or nearly free labor, sweat, and blood, which has helped America become rich and powerful, so many thousands of black people should have to subsist on relief or charity or live in poorhouses. We want the government of the United States to exempt our people from all taxation as long as we are deprived of equal justice under the laws of the land. We want equal education, but separate schools up to 16 for boys and 18 for girls on the condition that girls be sent to all women's colleges and universities. We want all black children educated, taught, and trained by black teachers. Under such schooling system, we will make a better nation of people. The United States government should provide free all necessary textbooks and equipment, schools and college buildings. The Muslim teachers shall be left free to teach and train their people in the way of righteousness, decency, and self-respect. Oh, this is a zinger. We believe that intermarriage or race mixing should be prohibited. We want the religion of Islam taught without hindrance or suppression. So, yeah, they basically mix in progressive elements. Yeah, demanding free schools, demanding full employment, demanding an end to police brutality with reactionary shit. Like, why would you ban intermarriage and race mixing? So this is their religious philosophy. We believe in the one God whose proper name is Allah. We believe in the Holy Quran and in the scriptures of all the prophets of God. We believe that the truth of the Bible has been tampered with and must be reinterpreted so that mankind will not be snared by the falsehoods that have been added to it. We believe in the judgment. We believe this first judgment will take place as God revealed in America. We believe in the resurrection of the dead, not in physical resurrection, but in mental resurrection, whatever the fuck that means. We believe in justice for all, whether in God or not. We believe, as others, that we are due equal justice as human beings. We believe in equality as a nation of equals. We do not believe that we are equal with our slave masters in the status of freed slaves. So, yeah, it just goes on and on. We believe that our women should be respected and protected as the women of other nationalities are respected and protected. We believe that Allah, God, appeared in the person of Master W. Fard Muhammad, July 1930, the long-awaited Messiah of the Christians and the Mahdi of the Muslims. We believe further and lastly that Allah is God, and besides him there is no God, and he will bring about a universal government of peace wherein we all can live in peace together. So this is what Malcolm X was taught, because Elijah Muhammad was also in prison at the same time for trying to dodge the draft. And this is what he was taught. Like, this is what he taught all the way up until he split from the Nation of Islam. Because they have a form of not even democratic centralism. They just have centralism. So you have Elijah Muhammad, who's basically an unaccountable dictator because he is Allah's messenger on earth. That is what they called him, the messenger. So you have to abide by the messenger's will. Otherwise, bad things would happen to you. You would be shunned. You would be expelled. You might even get your ass beat because this was a cult. And cults are not known for being very democratic. But again, the Nation of Islam had and still has a very strong prison ministry. Like, they do what communists should be doing, what leftists should be doing. They go to the most oppressed. They go to the most exploited. Who is the most oppressed and exploited in society? Black prisoners. So they basically have a ready-made audience. And that's why they fought to get Islam, well, this version of Islam, the Nation of Islam's cult ideology, taught in prisons, because they did not like the state was denying them access to recruits. And Malcolm X talks about how they used to go fishing. What is fishing? You basically go down to what we would call the hose stroll, or the shooting gallery, Skid Row, where all the homeless people, all of the drug addicts, all the prostitutes would hang out, and you would rap to them. You would go out and you would talk to them and say that they are beautiful, that they are members of the lost foundation of Islam, that you don't even know what your real name is, that come on down to the mosque and we'll teach you your history. We will give you respect. We will employ you. Like the Muslims own and still own a shitload of businesses. So people that want to change, the Nation of Islam also has a very notorious, and apparently it works very well, method of getting people off drugs and alcohol. If you watch Godfather of Harlem, like, there's actually a depiction of their detox and sober living program. So they do actual good shit in the black community. They're just a cult, but yeah, like most cults mix like decent shit with the bad shit. And in the case of the Nation of Islam, it's pretty bad shit. You've got anti-Semitism, you've got misogyny, you've got anti-miscegenation. All sorts of horrible things. So yeah, this is what the SPLC says about them. They have it designated as a hate group. Their ideology is anti-Semitism. Yeah, they are an anti-Semitic organization. Granted, the SPLC is quite ungenerous. So, since its founding in 1930, the Nation of Islam, NOI, has grown into one of the wealthiest and best-known black nationalist organizations in the United States, offering numerous programs and events designed to uplift black Americans. However, these efforts to support and empower black communities in the United States are overshadowed by the organization's lengthy record of anti-Semitism, homophobia, and connections to prominent white supremacists. They actually met with George Lincoln Rockwell. Yeah, the George Lincoln Rockwell, the guy who founded the American Nazi Party. Hold on, let me pull this up. When Malcolm X met the Nazis. New tab, paste, go. So yeah, And this was actually like, it was just like sort of a slow burn with Malcolm because he was loyal until he split. But like, it was just Elijah Muhammad they kept like doing stupider and stupider shit. So why did the Nation of Islam meet with the Nazi Party? There's even a picture of it. These are the most uncomfortable looking motherfuckers. You just got these dudes just surrounded. Like, look at this. Oh, fuck me. Pinterest. I hate Pinterest. I don't know who the fuck Claire Uziel is. I don't care. Get out. Come on, I know I had a good picture. There we go. Like that, bruh. You've got, this is Rockwell. Then you've got his two dudes. Then you've got the most irritated looking black people surrounding him. Like, bruh, yeah, now they're very close with the Church of Scientology. Like, they've basically bounced around from cult to cult. And Rockwell here actually donated $20 to the Nation of Islam. So why the fuck are black Muslims, is this group hanging out with Nazis? And we're gonna find out because Vice is going to tell us. So they were invited. Yeah, they were invited by Elijah Muhammad. The fascists hadn't come to make a bloody last stand. Instead, guards from the Fruit of Islam, the NOI's paramilitary branch, frisked the men and ushered them to front row center seats. So they put them right in the front row, prime seats. Their crisp brown shirt costumes and swastika armbands stood out against the suits and ties surrounding them. Despite the 90-degree heat, Rockwell and his men waited hours for the event's main attraction. There is no record of anyone cracking a smile at the situation's absurdity. The night's keynote speaker, NOI leader Elijah Muhammad, he was a sick dude. Like, he constantly had respiratory problems, canceled his appearance because of illness. According to historian William Schmaltz, Malcolm X delivered a speech, followed by an appeal for donations that singled out the few Caucasians in the audience. Rockwell contributed $20. When life photographer Eve Arnold raised her camera to capture the Nazis, Rockwell, presumably alerted to her Jewish ancestry by the Muslims, allegedly rasped, "I'll make a bar of soap out of you." She replied, "As long as it isn't a lampshade." So this dude, Rockwell, had been like just insulting black people. He said the most horrible shit about us. Like, he gave an interview to Alex Haley in Playboy, and I don't know how he even I don't even know how fucking how Haley made it through. If you don't know who Alex Haley is the guy who did Roots, and he also edited Malcolm's autobiography. So, really horrible group. Like, even more horrible than the people that are just going through today. So, nobody gives a shit about the history of the American Nazi Party. But, like, why could they link up with the NOI? Because the NOI is a black separatist organization. And the American Nazi Party is an organization that does not want integration. They don't want black people around. So they had common cause. Yeah, you want to go back to Africa, or you want an independent state? Rockwell actually opposed the idea of an independent state. But yeah, you all want to get the fuck away from us? Yeah, we'll help you. Here's $20. So Rockwell and Muhammad saw each other as authentic, as people willing to speak the truth, as people willing to speak the truth. They're versions of it, no matter the cost. Malcolm X ripped into Muhammad about this, and he already had like reservations to it. And they're still pretty close. The Nation of Islam is still pretty close with fascists. The Nation of Islam, under the auspices of Louis Farrakhan, maintains an open partnership with Tom Metzger, a notorious white supremacist. And in the last decade, the American Nazi Party website established a non-Aryan sympathizer page, offering a means for non-whites to aid in our struggle with mail-in contributions. If you are a non-white person and you're donating money to the American Nazi Party, you need to go get your head examined. So, Um, what type of speeches? Like, what was Malcolm talking about when he was with the nation? His ideology was always far, far more advanced. And this was why Elijah Muhammad began to become jealous of him, because the Nation of Islam is a fundamentally conservative organization, okay? They're a cult. They are an anti-revolutionary organization, okay? They are not going to storm through the streets and declare a People's Republic of New Africa because they don't believe in New Africa. They believe in black businesses. They believe in women sitting on the opposite side of the aisle. Now, this is not a revolutionary organization. So Malcolm was a revolutionary black nationalist. And he came into contradiction. His political views came into contradiction with the reactionary nationalist, the reactionary separatist Nation of Islam. So this is one of his most famous speeches, Message to the Grassroots. His theme of black unity. What you and I need to do is learn to forget our differences. When we come together, we don't come together as Baptists or Methodists. You don't catch hell because you're a Baptist. And you don't catch hell because you're a Methodist. You don't catch hell because you're a Democrat or a Republican. You don't catch hell because you're a Mason or an Elk. Those are fraternal organizations, secret societies. And you don't catch hell because you're an American, because if you were an American, you wouldn't catch any hell. You catch hell because you're a black man. You catch hell, all of us catch hell for the same reason. We have a common enemy. We have this in common. We have a common oppressor, a common exploiter, and a common discriminator. But once we all realize that we have this common enemy, then we unite on the basis of what we have in common. And what we have foremost in common is that enemy, the white man. He's an enemy to all of us. I know some of you all think that some of them aren't enemies. Time will tell. And Bandung, back in, I think, 1954, was the first unity meeting in centuries of black people. And once you study what happened at the Bandung Conference and the results of the Bandung Conference, it actually serves as a model for the same procedure you and I can use to get our problem solved. So he still has a very, very racialized view of the world. But you can slowly see the anti-imperialist progressive consciousness seeping in to messages like this. Like while Elijah Muhammad is meeting with Nazis, you have Malcolm X talking about the Bandung Conference. At Bandung, all the nations came together. There were dark nations from Africa and Asia. Some were Buddhists, some were Muslims, some were Christians, some were Confucianists, some were atheists. Despite their religious differences, they came together. Some were communists, some were socialists, some were capitalists. Despite their economic and political differences, they came together. All of them were black, brown, red, and yellow. The number one thing that was not allowed to attend the Bandung Conference was the white man. He found he couldn't come. Once they excluded the white man, they found that they could get together. Once they kept him out, everyone else fell right in and fell in line. This is the thing that you and I have to understand. And those people who came together didn't have nuclear weapons. They didn't have jet planes. They didn't have all of the heavy armaments that the white man has. But they had unity. Again, oversimplification, but still a nation growing pan-African, pan-revolutionary consciousness. So he's already blending this stuff with the shit that the Nation of Islam made him teach. And you also have him talking about like revolution. The Nation of Islam does not want you talking about revolution, okay? Like they sanction him because he says something bad about the US president that had been assassinated. We'll get to that later. I would like to make a few comments concerning the difference between the Black Revolution and the Negro Revolution. There's a difference. Are they both the same? And if they're not, what is the difference? What is the difference between a Black Revolution and a Negro Revolution? First, what is a revolution? Sometimes I'm inclined to believe that many of our people are using this word revolution loosely, without taking careful consideration of what this word actually means and what its historic characteristics are. When you study the historic nature of revolution, the motive of a revolution, the objective of a revolution, and the result of a revolution, and the method used in a revolution, you may change words. You may devise another program. You may change your goal, and you may change your mind. Look at the American Revolution in 1776. That revolution was carried out for what? For land. Why did they want land? Independence. How was it carried out? Bloodshed. Number one, it was based on land, the basis of independence. And the only way they could get it was bloodshed. So we've got a proto-historical materialist analysis. Whereas the Nation of Islam just wants to wait for Allah or the United States government to just dole out land because the Muslims asked. You've actually got Malcolm X talking about where revolutions come from and why revolutions are made. Granted, in a simplified fashion, but it's still popping through. The Russian Revolution. What was it based on? Land. He's speaking highly of a proletarian revolution. You haven't got a revolution that doesn't involve bloodshed, and you're afraid to bleed. I said you're afraid to bleed. As long as the white man sent you to Korea, you bled. He sent you to Germany, you bled. He sent you to the South Pacific to fight the Japanese, you bled. You bleed for white people. But when it comes time to seeing your own churches being bombed and your own little black girls be murdered, you haven't got no blood. You bleed when the white man says bleed. You bite when the white man says bite, and you bark when the white man says bark. I hate to say this about us, but it's true. How are you going to be nonviolent in Mississippi as violent as you were in Korea? How can you justify being nonviolent in Mississippi and Alabama when your churches are being bombed and your little girls are being murdered? At the same time, you're going to be violent with Hitler and Tojo and somebody else that you don't even know. Here's what he says about the Chinese Revolution. The Chinese Revolution, they wanted land. They threw the British out, along with the Uncle Tom Chinese, also known as the Kuomintang. Yeah, they did. They set a good example. When I was in prison, I read an article. Don't be shocked when I say I was prison. You're still in prison. That's what America means, prison. When I was in prison, I read an article in Life magazine showing a little Chinese girl, 9 years old. Her father was on his hands and knees, and she was pulling the trigger because he was an Uncle Tom Chinese. When they had the revolution over there, they took a whole generation of Uncle Toms, just wiped them out. And today, China is one of the toughest, roughest, most feared countries on this earth by the white man, because there are no Uncle Toms over there. Yes, there were. There were Uncle Toms, and one of their names was Deng Xiaoping. Anyways, so this always kills me. Why do you think Khrushchev and Mao can't get their heads together? White nationalism. I mean, yeah, Khrushchev was a racist fuck. Like, pretty much all of the Russian leaders were chauvinists, I think with the exception of Lenin. And pretty much all of them dogged China out. But, yeah. So, we see him blending a well-developed... It's obvious that this man read every newspaper in existence. But he's forced to sort of rein himself in by the bullshit that the Nation of Islam is making him teach. Oh, nice picture of him. You can still... It's funny, in this black and white picture, you can still tell that his hair is fucking red. I don't know why. I guess I clicked on it on accident. You also have the ballot and the bullet. I'll get to that later. This speech was given in 1963. He's talking about white liberals and conservatives. And again, you see how advanced his political consciousness is as opposed to the trash that I just read you from the Nation of Islam program.
This crooked game of power politics here in America, the Negro, namely the race problem, integration, civil rights issue, are all nothing but tools used by the whites who call themselves liberals against another group of whites who call themselves conservatives, either to get into power or to retain power. Among whites here in America, the political teams are no longer divided into Democrats and Republicans. The whites who are now struggling for control of the American political throne are divided into liberal and conservative camps. The white liberals from both parties cross party lines to work together toward the same goal, and white conservatives from both parties do likewise. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful, more hypocritical than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And by winning the friendship and support of the Negro, the white liberal is able to use the Negro as a pawn or a weapon in this political football game that is constantly raging between the white liberals and the white conservatives. The American Negro is nothing but a political football, and the white liberals control this ball through tricks or tokenism, false promises of integration and civil rights. In this game of deceiving and using the American Negro, the white liberals have complete cooperation of the Negro civil rights leader, who sell our people out for a few crumbs of token recognition, token gains, token progress, In the New York Tribune, in an editorial dated February the 5th, 1960, they pointed out that out of 11 million qualified Negro voters, only 2,700,000 actually take time to vote. This means that, roughly speaking, only 3 million out of the 11 million Negroes who are qualified to vote take an active part. And the remaining 8 million remain voluntarily inactive. And yet it is this small minority, the 3 million Negro voters, who help determine who will be the next president. If who will be the next president can be influenced by 3 million Negro voters, it is easy to see why the presidential candidates of both political parties put on such a false show with the Civil Rights Bill.
You can compare this to like modern day Maoist analysis that voting is pretty much pointless. Like Malcolm X, one thing that I've seen consistently from him is that while he recognizes that the only way to really fundamentally change the system is some type of revolution, he supports using what we would label reformist or electoralist tactics. Note, not strategy, but reformist and electoralist tactics to sort of develop and flex our political muscle. That's why he calls us political football, because so many of us don't even vote.
And
granted, so many of us don't even vote because at this time, back when he was speaking, and even now, a lot of us can't vote because we have criminal records or a variety of other things going on that effectively disenfranchise us. Plus, you also have the South, which is gerrymandering and instituting all sorts of stupid ID requirements to effectively disenfranchise black people.
Promises of integration. They must impress the 3 million voting Negroes who are the actual integration seekers. And if so much fuss is made over these 3 million integration seekers, what would the presidential candidates have?
Also, you could tell, like, he's been speaking a lot. Like, he's basically losing his voice in this segment.
To do to appease the 8 million non-voting Negroes if they ever decided to become politically active? They hold the balance of power. Who are the 8 million non-voting Negroes? What do they want? And why don't they vote? The 3 million Negro voters are the so-called middle-class Negroes, or high-class Negroes, or uppity Negroes, who are referred to by the late Howard University sociology professor E. Franklin Frazier as the black bourgeoisie, who have been educated to think
He's using, like, Marxist terms.
as patriotic individualists with no racial pride whatsoever, who believe in and look forward to the future integrated, intermarried society that is constantly being promised to them by the Negro politician. And therefore, this integration-minded 3 million minority remain an active part of the white-controlled political parties. But it must never be overlooked that these 3 million Negro integration seekers are only a small minority of the 11 million qualified Negro voters. The 8 million non-voting Negroes are the majority, the downtrodden black masses. They have refused to vote. They've refused to take a part in politics because they reject the Uncle Tom approach of the clergy politician leadership that has been handpicked for the so-called Negroes by the white man himself. This clergy politician leadership does not speak for the Negro majority. They don't speak for the black masses. They speak for the black bourgeoisie, the brainwashed, white-minded, middle-class minority, who, because they are ashamed of their race, because they are ashamed of being black and don't want to be identified with black, they are seeking to lose this black identity by mixing and mingling and intermarrying and integrating with the white society.
Yeah, so you see a lot of the like Nation of Islam ideology coming through, the anti-miscegenation, what have you. But he's also mixing it with a very advanced political and social class analysis.
The race problem cannot be solved by listening to the white-minded, brainwashed minority. The white man must try to learn what the black majority wants. The president would be wise to try and learn what the black masses want. And the only way to find this out is by listening to the man who speaks for the black masses. And I can declare to you tonight and to the entire world that the man here in America who speaks for the majority, the downtrodden, dissatisfied black masses, is this same man who so many thousands of our people are flocking toward to see and hear. This same Mr. Muhammad who is labeled by you as a black supremacist.
The same Mr. Muhammad who met with Nazis. Well, would have met with Nazis if he hadn't been sick.
And as a racist and as an extremist.
And the funny thing about this is that, like, yeah, the white people, the white liberal establishment was terrified of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. They actually produced a documentary. It was called The Hate That Hate Produced. Like, when you interact with the Nation of Islam and its members in real life, like they are extremely conservative people. Like, the Fruit of Islam doesn't even carry guns. They're very trained. They train in jiu-jitsu, and I think they train in karate, but like they are not armed. They believe in capitalism. Okay, they have businesses all over the place, mainly bakeries. I think they have a sort of like water company as well. But Absapure, that's what it's called. It's advertised in the final call. But like they don't, like they are not a revolutionary organization. They also like intervene in gang beefs. If I recall correctly, in Washington D.C., the city actually had them go and like patrol the projects, basically do a sort of impromptu community policing, because people respect the Muslims, the Nation of Islam, which is just called the Muslims in the black community, because chances are if you're in the black community, the Nation of Islam are the only Muslims that you come into contact with, even though most orthodox regularized sects and groupings of Islam consider the NOI heretics at best, but we just call them the Muslims because that's how we know them. Anyways, yeah, so they do stuff like that. So they're an extremely conservative organization, but white people who think that the fucking Democratic Party is somehow secretly communist, think that the Nation of Islam is a revolutionary organization. All you have to do is observe them to realize that they are not. But I digress. I cannot account for the stupidity of settlers.
3 million middle-class Negroes are casting their ballots for integration and intermarriage. What do the non-voting black masses who are in the majority want? Find out what the black masses want, and then perhaps America's grave race problem can be solved.
The only way to solve America's grave race problem is the destruction of the United States. This is another one of my favorite ones. The house Negro and the field Negro.
To understand this,
you see this comparison made a lot.
You have to go back to what young brother here referred to as the house Negro and the field Negro back during slavery. There was two kinds.
This is basically a proto-class analysis, like the house Negroes of the bourgeoisie, the field Negroes of the lumpen proletariat and the proletariat.
Slave.
But what Malcolm X was a master of was making these concepts understandable to black people. Like if you just go among a black community in, say, 1964 and just start hurling out the words bourgeoisie, proletariat, lumpen proletariat, mass, they're not going to know what the fuck you're talking about. But if you use house slave and field slave, they're going to know exactly what you're talking about, because that is our national experience.
There was the house Negro and the field Negro. The house Negro, they lived in the house with master. They dressed pretty good. They ate good because they ate his food, what he left. They lived in the attic or the basement, but still they lived near their master. And they loved their master more than the master loved himself. They would give their life to save their master's house quicker than the master would. The house Negro, if the master said, we got a good house here, the house Negro said, yeah, we got a good house here. Whenever the master said we, he said we. That's how you can tell a house Negro. If the master's house caught on fire, the house Negro would fight harder to put the blaze out than the master would. If the master got sick, the house Negro would say, what's the matter, boss? We sick.
Thank you for reminding me. But yeah, his oratorical skills for like that's traditional black cadence. I unmuted myself. Thank you for letting me know though. But like that's how we talk when we're trying to sell shit. Like if you listen to black preachers, like that's how black preachers talk. It definitely traces back to Africa. It's an griot tradition. Griots were basically traveling storytellers who were paid to boost the reputation and talk about the great deeds that a ruler and his ancestors had done. And in this tradition, like that's where we got this from. That cadence, like you'll hear that if you go to a mosque, if you're listening to Malcolm X, if you go to a black church, like it's all the same, just with varying degrees. He also uses humor very effectively, which is another characteristic of the new African cadence and speaking style. So we basically invented edutainment. Like we'll have you fucking rolling, but you're also learning shit.
He identified himself with his master more than his master identified with himself. And if you came to the house Negro and said, let's run away, let's escape, let's separate, that house Negro would look at you and say, man, you crazy. What you mean separate? Where is there a better house than this? Where can I wear better clothes than this? Where can I eat better food than this? That was that house Negro. In those days, he was called a house nigger. And that's what we call him today because we still got some house niggers running around here. This modern house Negro loves his master. He wants to live near him. He'll pay 3 times as much as the house is worth just to live near his master. And then brag about, I'm the only Negro out here.
I'm the only one on my job. I'm the only one in this school. You nothing but a house Negro. And if someone come to you right now and say, let's separate, you say the same thing that the house Negro said on the plantation. What you mean separate? From America? This good white man? Where you gonna get a better job than you get here? I mean, this is what you say. I ain't left nothing in Africa. That's what you say. Why, you left your mind in Africa. On that same plantation, there was the field Negro. The field Negro, those were the masses. There was always more Negroes in the field than there was Negroes in the house. The Negro in the field caught hell. He ate leftovers. In the house, they ate high up on the hog. The Negro in the field didn't get nothing but what was left of the insides of the hog. They call them chitlins nowadays. In those days, they call them what they were.
guts. That's what you were, a gut eater. And some of you all still gut eaters. The field Negro was beaten from morning till night. He lived in a shack, in a hut. He wore cast-off clothes. And he hated his master. I say he hated his master. He was intelligent. That house Negro loved his master. But that field Negro, remember, they were in the majority. And they hated the master. When the house caught on fire, he didn't try and put it out. That field Negro prayed for a wind, for a breeze. When the master got sick, the field Negro prayed that he died. If someone come to the field Negro and said, let's separate, let's run, he didn't say, where are we going? He said, any place is better than here. You got field Negroes in America today. I'm a field Negro. The masses are the field Negroes. When they see this man's house on fire, you don't hear these little Negroes talking about our government is in trouble. They say the government is in trouble. Imagine a Negro, our government. I even heard one say, our astronauts. They won't even let him near the plant. And our astronauts, our Navy, that's a Negro that's out of his mind. That's a Negro that's out of his mind. Just as the slave master in that day used Tom, the house Negro, to keep the field Negroes in check, the same old slave master today has Negroes who are nothing but modern Uncle Toms, 20th century Uncle Toms, to keep you and me in check, keep us under control, keep us passive and peaceful and nonviolent. That's Tom making you nonviolent.
So, yeah, a lot of talk about Uncle Tommy. And he explains these concepts. He's basically the master of what Fanon would call not just giving a political speech, but actually making this stuff accessible to the masses. Because if the masses are not able to understand what you're talking about, if you just jump up and start saying proletariat, bourgeoisie, all these uppity type terms to people who may have an 8th grade education, who may not have been incarcerated and had the opportunity to read all of these books because they're working as a fucking maid or janitor for 12-hour shifts, your ideology is not going to be, it's not going to become a force. It's just going to be intellectual masturbation. So the reason why all of the urban lumpen proletarians in the 60s and 70s read Malcolm on every rooftop was because he made this shit plain. That's why they read his autobiography. They were able to relate to what was being discussed there. It wasn't using all of these rarefied terms. It didn't break down the fucking economics of every single bolt of cotton that their ancestors produced. It just talked about how shit was in language that was accessible to the masses because Malcolm was of the masses. That is a lesson that we need to learn as leftists, because people are always asking, like, why don't people join our org? Why don't we have any black people? Well, for one, most left organizations in the United States are majority white, and black people, let's just be real here, don't want to spend any more time around white people than we absolutely have to. Like, we put up with your shit at work. We don't want to put up with your shit in our extracurricular activities. and in our free time as well, because that's what political activity is at this point. It's free time. It's extracurricular shit. House, car, bills, making sure your kids have food to eat. Like, that's not extracurricular shit. So if the choice is to pick up another shift at work and go listen to some grad student hipster talk about why we should all read Zizek, most people are going to pick up an extra shift at the Slave. Yeah. You all got a taste of the black oratorical tradition as well. This got Malcolm in trouble. This was like the breaking point that got Malcolm first silenced and then basically put out of the Nation of Islam. Also, there was a horrible police raid on a mosque in LA that Malcolm helped found, and Malcolm was pissed. He personally knew the dude that was murdered by the LAPD, which is a fascist organization. Like, every large city's police department has taken one page or the other from the LAPD's playbook. SWAT was developed in LA. Special Weapons and Tactics Teams was developed in LA to deal with the Black Panther Party. Okay? You have the Rampart scandal. Like, LAPD ain't shit. Horrible fascist Gestapo type organization. And they went to the mosque. The brothers were outside preparing clothes for a clothing drive for one of the charity efforts that was organized by the mosque. And the police just showed up and just started shooting and beating the fuck out of people outside the mosque. And Malcolm X was pissed. He was ready to go and throw down. And Elijah Muhammad, like, put a fucking, yanked his chain. They told him no. They didn't want to react to it at all because like I said, the Nation of Islam is not a political organization. They make hackneyed-ass political analysis, but they are not an organization that, at this time, was engaged in politics. Yeah, he wanted to tool up after that. And Elijah Muhammad was like, no, are you crazy? And then, after Kennedy was assassinated, okay, the mosque thing in L.A. was in 1962. Kennedy was killed November 22nd, 1963. Malcolm X got in trouble because he said that the murder of President Kennedy was chickens coming home to roost. Basically, America's hatred had now come home and choked the life out of the chief gardener of American fascism. Elijah Muhammad was pissed because he was a reactionary. He was like, the country loved this guy, and you're talking about you're going to bring hatred and bullshit down on all Muslims. Never mind, they already produced a horrible documentary lambasting you. They already considered you a revolutionary organization, even though you were basically just a black business incubator. But, like, this is what Malcolm X said. This is what got him in real trouble. Elijah Muhammad was also doing some nasty shit, but I'll talk about the nasty shit after this.
A controversy some months ago with your leader. Is that over?
Well, I've been silent for the past 90 days because of some statements I made concerning the President of the United States, which were distorted.
So, yeah, they silenced him. Elijah Muhammad would not allow him to speak in public for 90 days. 3 months.
They were distorted.
And yes.
What did you say, Malcolm?
Well, I said the same thing that everybody says, that his assassination was the result of the climate of hate. But only I said the chickens came home to roost, and which means the same thing. Climate of hate means that this is the result of something. And when I said chickens coming home to roost, I said the same thing.
But you did not say that you were glad the president was killed.
No, that's what the press said. What would I look like saying that I'm glad the president was killed?
Malcolm, this was your first public statement in that 90-day period.
Malcolm was glad the president was killed. Like, there's no point in denying it. He was happy.
Is the first time I opened up my mouth in 90 days. That's why I'm talking so fast and so hearty.
You feel, however, that we're making progress.
No. I will never say that progress is being made. Knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches. There's no progress. You pull it all the way out. That's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. And they haven't even begun to pull a knife out, much less try and heal the wound. They won't even admit the knife is there.
So Malcolm X had also begun conducting an investigation into rumors that Elijah Muhammad was taking advantage of underage girls that were employed in his office and at his home as his secretaries. And he interviewed these girls, and turns out that not only had Elijah Muhammad been fucking these underage girls, these teenagers, but he'd also gotten many of them pregnant. So keep in mind, like this, his world was just shattered. Okay, he had given the best years of his life to this man and to this man's organization, and only to find out that he was a fucking hypocrite. Okay, the messenger of Allah is supposed to be pure. Elijah Muhammad had a wife. Okay, they don't do that whole polygamy thing. He had a wife. He was married, and he broke his marriage vows and with underage girls. So he's a sex pest. He's taken advantage of these people who view him as the messenger of the Messiah on earth, one who had personal contact with the Messiah, W.D. Fard, and he's also a pedo. And Malcolm X has suffered to build up this organization. Like that speech that I showed a few minutes ago, like this man was hoarse. He's driving himself hoarse. This man could barely talk, trying to build up your organization, and you repay it by being a hypocritical liar and a disgusting pervert. Yeah. So that was the breaking point. The LA situation, the situation at the mosque where the police basically beat the shit out of and murdered Muslims, the silencing after JFK's assassination, and the sexual abuse of young black girls by somebody that they held in high esteem. So you basically had like 3 strikes and you're fucking out. I can't do this anymore. So he went on Hajj. He went overseas, and a lot of the racial bullshit, he remained a black nationalist for all of his life, okay? Like a lot of white people, a lot of white leftists believe that, oh, Malcolm X suddenly loved white people. Like, no. OAAU, Organization of African American Unity, was still an all black organization. But he eventually came around to supporting tactical alliances with white people who were actually doing the work to take down the racist bullshit that was going on within their communities. Okay, because what a lot of white people do is they join black organizations and they ruin them. That's why Malcolm X called the March on Washington the farce on Washington, because when you have a black cup of coffee, strong black coffee will wake you up. But if you just pour, let's say you have 1/3 of a mug of coffee and 2/3 of a mug of milk, that's not coffee anymore. It is going to put you to sleep. And that's what happened with the March on Washington. That's why Malcolm X, he didn't necessarily oppose it. He supported any time that black people got together. But he also realized that the premise was watered down. He said that this was originally going to be a militant demonstration. Black people were going to block off the airport. Black people were basically going to tear Washington, D.C. out the frame. But once Walter Reuther, once all of these groups, these various white religious groups, these various white yellow labor unions, all these various groups joined, all of the white kids from Harvard and Yale and Stanford, they wanted to come to the march too. So you had them coming to the march, and instead of it being a militant demonstration, it basically turned into a giant party. Everybody was like, oh, were you at the march? Are you going to the march? It became a fucking social event, and you had fucking proto-hippies and black supposed militants sitting out by the reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial, dangling their bare feet in the fucking pool. Like, it was a farce. That's why Malcolm X called it a farce. So he remained a black nationalist. He was always of the opinion that only black people could liberate black people. But he abandoned a lot of the pseudo-scientific Yakub created white people mother wheel bullshit that was basically black Scientology. So that was a major factor in his political development. So you had him presiding over a meeting at which members of the American Nazi Party were present, to saying this, because George Lincoln Rockwell, he did this hate bus tour, basically going around trolling civil rights marches. And this is what Malcolm told him. 1965. This is to warn you that I am no longer held in check from fighting white supremacists by Elijah Muhammad's separatist black Muslim movement, and that if your present racist agitation against our people there in Alabama causes physical harm to Reverend King or any other black Americans who are only attempting to enjoy their rights as free human beings, that you and your Ku Klux Klan friends will be met with maximum physical retaliation from those of us who are not handcuffed by the disarming philosophy of nonviolence and who believe in asserting our right of self-defense by any means necessary. By any means necessary. So he was basically saying, you know what, Elijah ain't my boy no more. He basically drummed me out of the Nation of Islam. Now we can fuck you up. So he came back from Mecca and he started the Organization of African American Unity. So what was the purpose of the Organization of African American Unity? Upon this establishment, the Afro-American people will launch a cultural revolution which will provide the means for restoring our identity, that we might rejoin our brothers and sisters on the African continent. No, this was established in 1965. The Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in China did not start until 1966. On the African continent, culturally, psychologically, economically, and share with them the sweet fruits of freedom from oppression and independence of racist governments. OAAU welcomes all persons of African origin to come together and dedicate their ideas, skills, and lives to free our people from oppression. Branches of the Organization of African American Unity may be established by the people of African descent, wherever they may be and whatever their ideology, as long as they be descendants of Africa and dedicated to our one goal, freedom from oppression. So he was establishing a non-sectarian organization. Like, he didn't care if you were a Christian socialist. He didn't care if you were a Maoist. Well, there were no Maoists at this point in history. There was Mao Zedong thought. He didn't care if you were whatever the fuck you were, as long as you held the line that freedom from oppression was necessary and should be won by any means necessary. The basic program of the Organization of African American Unity, which is now being presented, can and will be modified by the membership, taking into consideration national, regional, and local conditions that require flexible treatment. The Organization of Afro-American Unity encourages active participation of each member, since we feel that each and every Afro-American has something to contribute to our freedom. Thus, each member will be encouraged to participate in the committee of his or her choice. Understanding the differences that have been created amongst us by our oppressor in order to keep us divided, the Organization of African American Unity strives to ignore or submerge these artificial divisions by focusing our activities and our loyalties upon one goal: freedom of oppression from oppression. During this period, he also engaged with a revolutionary nationalist / communist group called RAM, Revolutionary Action Movement. This also played a major role in the formation and development of the militant black liberation movement that eventually transitioned to armed struggle in the 70s. So I'm going to cover RAM in a later video sometime this month, but I don't want this to be 5 hours fucking long. So he basically lays out the line here. I'm going to link to this when I upload it on YouTube. So he has Cultural Committee, Economic Committee, Educational Committee, Political Committee, Publications Committee, Social Committee, Self-Defense Committee, Youth Committee, and Staff Committees, Finance, Fundraising, Legal, and Membership. So pretty dope. A lot more advanced and a lot more realistic and a lot more developed than this trash. So, yeah. This is him speaking after he returned from Mecca. And the development is, it's astonishing. Oh, is he muted? Yeah. Wait.
By the new Arabic name, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz.
I've always
Elijah Muhammad died in 1975.
had the name on my passport, Malik El-Shabazz, I only used it in the Muslim world. Well, Hajj is a title that is given to any Muslim who makes the pilgrimage to Mecca during the official Hajj season.
Well, will you now use Shabazz and drop X?
I'll probably continue to use Malcolm X and I'll probably use it as long as the situation that produced it exists.
Also, I love his smile.
You don't feel that Shabazz takes the place of X?
My going to Mecca and going into the Muslim...
You mean Louis Farrakhan? He's old as dirt. He'll probably be dead soon. But, yeah. The Nation of Islam has a habit of exceptionally long-lived leadership figures.
World.
I think Farrakhan just turned 90.
To the African world and being recognized and accepted as a Muslim and as a brother may solve the problem for me personally. But I personally feel that my personal problem is never solved as long as the problem is not solved for all of our people in this country. So I remain Malcolm X as long as there is a need to protest and struggle and fight against the injustices that our people are involved in this country.
Are you prepared to go into the United Nations at this point and ask that charges be brought against the United States for its treatment of American Negroes?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, please.
I think you're right in my chair.
The audience will have to be quiet. Yes, as I pointed out when I was during my traveling, that nations look, African nations and Asian nations and Latin American nations look very hypocritical when they stand up in the United Nations condemning the racist practices of South Africa and that which is practiced by Portugal and Angola, and saying nothing in the UN about the racist practices that are manifest every day against Negroes in this society.
They didn't do that because the United States dumped a shitload of money on them. Portugal was a little shitty, broke-ass nation. They didn't have anything to give anybody. South Africa didn't give a fuck. But so America was showering foreign aid on people and stuff. And if they got up and demanded that the United States stop doing horrible things to black people, all of that little tap would be shut off. That's why self-reliance is best, and that's why it's best not to be reliant on aid from foreign countries, because the foreign countries are going to use you to their advantage.
Even in South Africa, those Africans aren't faced with bayonets and aren't faced with police dogs. I would be not a man. If I was in a position to bring it in front of the United Nations and didn't do so, I wouldn't be a man.
Malcolm, do you intend to lead the charge in the United Nations?
Well, I find that to say you're going to lead something creates a lot of hostility, division, jealousy, and envy. I hope to work with any group of leaders.
He's talking about his experience with the Nation of Islam. Like, there were factions within the nation that hated Malcolm. Like, they were jealous of the prestige that he got. And why did he get this prestige? Because he told people what was true. He didn't just get up and start raving about Allah, etc. He used his experience. He used the knowledge that he obtained through his autodidactism. He didn't have any university education. Yet he could debate and he could argue rings around people who were professional debaters. Like, he could run rings about attorneys. He could run rings around people who were politicians. He could run rings around people whose job it was to literally talk for a living. And a lot of people resented him, hated him for that. Like, who the fuck does this dude think he is? He think he all that. And the Nation of Islam was so petty that even after he left, after he was put out of the Nation of Islam, they continued to fuck with him. They actually evicted him from his house. Like, Malcolm X had no assets. He had nothing. Everything that he had was given to him by the Nation of Islam. His car, his house, they actually evicted him from his house, or tried to, and eventually they just firebombed it. They blew his house up. So they wanted to do this man to death for embarrassing Elijah Muhammad and daring to join the movement, the broader movement, as opposed to remaining in their cult. So yeah, they hated this dude. That's what he's talking about with the jealousy and envy and hatred. That's why he wanted to be part of a collective like RAM or like the OAAU, as opposed to just being, hey, I'm Malcolm, I'm the big boy. And a lot of modern day leaders, so-called leaders, in the so-called revolutionary movement today, That's why I oppose like great leader theory and all that bullshit. Like it's too easy for them to bump you off. And like just the fact that that shit goes to your head like I'm the man, like it's just a very very toxic leadership style. So the modern day movement could definitely learn a lot about the benefits of collectives from listening to Malcolm X speak on this. It's always best to be part of a collective group. I mean, I understand like me, I'm just sitting here talking in front of a microphone. I've got a decent sized following, but still, like it's not just me. I'm actually addressing issues that are relevant to all of us because I want people to be politically educated. I want people to not make the same stupid mistakes that our predecessors did. But also having nice people to talk to in chat helps.
Any group of organizations to do whatever is necessary to see that this problem is brought before the United Nations.
Have you had any commitments from any nations in Africa to support you in such a move?
I would rather not say at this time. But one thing I found in my travels, all of them look upon us as their long-lost brother.
You realize the implication is that you have had such commitments when you say...
This is your interpretation of what I said.
Also, this is why, like, I fucking hate reporters. Like, they just love playing word games, and they love trying to make fools out of people.
One thing that I found in all of my travels was that all of the Africans, not only the Africans, but the Asians and the Muslims, look upon us as their long-lost brothers. And America had actually tricked many of them into a hands-off policy by giving them the impression that she was honestly trying to do something to solve the problem. My argument over there was designed to prove that it is impossible for the United States government to solve the race problem. It's impossible.
Malcolm, on your trip abroad, you said you sensed a feeling of great brotherhood, and that conceivably you would be working toward integration in this country now. At least this is what you're reported to have said. Have you any comment on it?
I don't think that I ever mentioned anything about working toward integration. They haven't even got integration right here in New York City. You have worse integration problems in the North than they have in the South. So if it doesn't work if you can't bring about integration in New York City as international, cosmopolitan, up-to-date as it's supposed to be, you will never get integration anywhere else in the country.
Are you prepared to work with some of the leaders of the other civil rights organizations?
Certainly, certainly. We will work with any groups, organizations, or leaders in any way, as long as it's genuinely designed to get results.
Does your new beard have any religious significance?
No, not particularly, but I do think that you'll find black people in America, as they strive to throw off the shackles of mental colonialism, will also probably reflect an effort to throw off the shackles of cultural colonialism. And they may begin to reflect desires of their own, with standards of their own.
Malcolm, a more controversial remarks was a call for black people to get rifles and form rifle clubs some time back. Do you still favor that for self-defense?
I don't see why that should be controversial. I think that if white people found themselves the victim of the same kind of brutality that black people in this country face, and they saw that the government was either unwilling or unable to protect them, that the intelligence on the part of the whites would make them get some rifles and shotguns and protect themselves. Now, Negroes are developing some kind of intellectual maturity too.
Oops.
Malcolm X.
Themselves. Now, Negroes are developing some kind of intellectual maturity too. And they can see that having waited upon the government to protect them has been a wait that has been in vain. So any of them who live in areas where the government is not able to do its job, then we do have to get together and do a job of protecting ourselves. No Negro leaders have fought for...
So yeah, definite, like, advance from...
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We're doing Peace Report.
I don't want to watch Democracy Now! Right now. That's very boring. So I'm going to wrap up with his address on the Organization of African American Unity.
Assalamu alaikum.
Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies. Everybody is here. As many of you know, last March, when it was announced that I was no longer in the Black Muslim movement, it was pointed out that it was my intention to work among the 22 million non-Muslim Afro-Americans and to try and form some type of organization or create a situation where the young people, our young people, the students and others, could study the problems of our people for a period of time and then come up with a new analysis and give us some new ideas and some new suggestions as to how to approach a problem that too many other people had been playing around with for too long. And that we would have some kind of meeting and determine at a later date whether to form a black nationalist party or a black nationalist army. There have been many of our people across the country from all walks of life who have taken it upon themselves to try and pool their ideas and to come up with some kind of solution to the problem that confronts all of our people. And tonight we are here to try and get an understanding of what it is they've come up with. Also, recently, when I was blessed to make a trip or a pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, where I met many people from all over the world, plus spent many weeks in Africa, trying to broaden my own scope and get more of an open mind to look at the problem as it actually is. One of the things that I realized, and I realized this even before going over there, was that our African brothers have gained their independence faster than you and I here in America have. They've also gained recognition and respect as human beings much faster than you and I. Just 10 years ago on the African continent, our people were colonized. They were suffering all forms of colonization, oppression, exploitation, degradation, humiliation, discrimination, and every other kind of Asian. And in a short time, they have gained more independence, more recognition, more respect as human beings than you and I have. And I live in a country which is supposed to be the citadel of education, freedom, justice, democracy, all of those other pretty soundings. So it was our intention to try and find out what was our African brothers doing to get results so that you and I could study what they had done and perhaps gain from that study or benefit from their experiences. And my traveling over there was designed to help to find out how. One of the first things that the independent African nations did was to form an organization called the Organization of African Unity. The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way. To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere, and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary. That's our motto. The purpose of our organization is to start right here in Harlem, which has the largest concentration of people of African descent that exists anywhere on this earth. There are more Africans here in Harlem than exist in any city on the African continent, because that's what you and I are, Africans. The Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Constitution of the United States, and the Bill of Rights are the principles in which we believe, and that these documents, if put into practice,
represent the essence of mankind's hopes and good intentions, desirous that all Afro-American people and organizations should henceforth unite so that the welfare and well-being of our people will be assured, we are resolved to reinforce the common bond of purpose between our people by submerging all of our differences and establishing non-sectarian constructive programs for human rights. We hereby present this charter. Number one, the establishment. The Organization of Afro-American Unity shall include all people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere. In essence, what it is saying, instead of you and me running around here seeking allies in our struggle for freedom, in the Irish neighborhood or the Jewish neighborhood or the Italian neighborhood, we need to seek some allies among people who look something like we do. And once we get their allies, it's time out for you and me to stop running away from the wolf right into the arms of the fox, looking for some kind of help. That's a drag. Number two, self-defense. Since self-preservation is the first law of nature, we assert the Afro-Americans' right to self-defense. The Constitution of the United States of America clearly affirms the right of every American citizen to bear arms. And as Americans, we will not give up a single right guaranteed under the Constitution. The history.
So he's definitely good at like blending the desire to separate from this horrible system, but he's also a supporter of using the rights that this country ostensibly on the surface grants us, such as the right to bear arms. Robert F. Williams, who I'm also going to cover in a video this month, does this as well, as did the Black Panther Party.
The history of unpunished violence against our people clearly indicates that we must be prepared to defend ourselves, or we will continue to be a defenseless people at the mercy of a ruthless and violent racist mob.
Who taught you to hate your...
So that's pretty much it. So summing up, he developed from a sort of apolitical but still angry hustler to a basically what you would call he identified himself, his fellow prisoners in prison identified him as Satan because he was viscerally anti-religious. Then he became a member of a cult. He helped build that cult, and that cult fucked him over when he realized that cult was doing cult shit. Then he developed into a revolutionary pan-Africanist and third worldist revolutionary. By third worldist, I don't mean those idiots that say that revolution is hopeless in the United States. I mean a supporter of the third world revolutionary movement, which was peaking during this period in world history. And upon his assassination, he was also on the road to becoming a revolutionary socialist, because we all know the phrase, to be a capitalist is to be a bloodsucker. Granted, it's still a bit more nuanced than that, because I think he supported black businesses in our communities to replace non-black owned businesses. So again, when we talk about the black community, we have to be sort of dialectical and nuanced. But regardless, like I said at the beginning, if you're black and a revolutionary, you came to revolution through Malcolm. So yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. Feel free to hit me up with questions. I want to upload this to YouTube, and it is almost 3 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap